Welcome to this episode on handling objections. In serious selling, we explained how objections can be good, and we gave you 3 golden rules for handling them. Firstly, we said you must listen. You must let the customer talk and fully explain their concern. We then said you must clarify. Too often people jump to conclusions and don't fully understand either the objection or the source of the objection, and perhaps therefore the best way to deal with it. Finally, we said then, and only then, answer the objection, or defer your answer if you need more information. But a question we often get from our viewers is, can you give any tips on actually how to answer, especially how to stop the potential buyer from simply throwing in one objection after another? Well, of course we can. So in this episode, I'm going to give you 6 simple top tips that will help you answer any objections you get with a little more confidence. So here we go. Tip 1. Get all the objections out. Customers do sometimes keep throwing in one objection after another. So it's worth you knowing that if the customer is doing this, quite often they're not real objections. They are what we call false objections. And customers use these because they are not actually interested in what you have to offer. They are simply looking for a reason to say no. So, what should you do? Well, firstly, don't be afraid of objections. If you get one, clarify, and then ask if there are any others. Yes, you heard me correctly. Ask for more, because this puts you in control and will eventually give you a finite list of things that you need to answer. Doing this will stop the customer throwing in more objections afterwards. And if they do, this gives you a clue that they might be wasting your time. So, now you have your objection or list of objections. What next? Well, our second top tip is to test the objection. Now, this is a very powerful technique because it means the customer has to make a commitment to potentially either doing business with you or not. So here is the question that you need to ask. Well, if we could do that, would you be prepared to go ahead? Now, this is quite a clever question because the customer, as I said, now has to make a commitment to do business or lie. Of course, they could say no, but if they do, then this question's why they're even asking the question in the first place. And is it a real objection? So it's a great way of testing the objection. Our third top tip is to challenge the objection. Remember, we said in the 3 C's episode that objections could actually be coming from your competition. So you might need to be prepared to challenge it. Now, firstly, this might simply be in the form of defense against something that's incorrect. And this is why situational fluency is so important, and why knowing all you can about your company, your products, your market, your competition, etc. is so critical. The second way to challenge your customer objection is to base it on what the customer has been telling you. So you might have to ask the customer why they would say something when they've been telling you something else. Obviously, the top skill required here is that you have been listening. So perhaps go back and watch episode 23 of Serious Selling called Listen Up. Our fourth top tip is to reverse the objection. Now, with this technique, it's about using the reason the customer is giving you not to do something as the very reason why they must do something. Let me give you an example. Let's say your product or service helps a business get invoices paid quicker. Then you wouldn't let the excuse that the customer's cash flow is slow be a reason not to do business with you, because this is exactly what your product or service resolves. So to use this technique, you've got to fully understand the business challenges your customer is facing, which comes from good questioning. So again, I'm going to suggest you go back and brush up on some of your questioning skills by watching episodes 21 through 26, and you'll find this gives you all the ammunition you need to reverse a customer's objection. So, on to tip 5, outweigh the objection. Now, this is about comparison and quite often is relevant to a very common objection: price. So here we suggest you compare their spend with you with something else. Compare it with things like, let's say, lost opportunities in the future, should they not do this today. You could compare it to maybe the same spend where perhaps you can show savings. You could compare it to a similar spend where the investment with you is much smaller than the total spend in that particular area. I don't know, perhaps you could compare it to a totally different spend to simply demonstrate how an investment with you isn't that large compared to how the company spends its money in general. You see, the key is finding something that you can compare your product or service with that outweighs the objection itself. So, our last and final tip on handling objections: minimize the objection. Now, the technique here is to break the objection down into its smallest denomination. Minimizing the objection is a technique that is, again, quite often used when the objection is about price, but it doesn't have to be. But if it was price, then you may say something like, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, that does only equate to a cost of $5 per day. You see, in this example, the goal is to make the cost sound as small as possible. But as I said, it's not just for use with price. It might be a project rollout or software deployment where the customer is worried about the workload involved in changing. So in this situation, it'd be about minimizing the work involved, by perhaps explaining that it would only be so many hours a day. So there you have 6 top tips on how to deal with objections. Tip 1, get all the objections out. Tip 2, test the objection. Number 3 was challenge the objection. Number 4 was to reverse the objection. Number 5 was to outweigh the objection. And tip number 6, minimize the objection. So, I'd like to say thanks to all of you who have actually asked about this topic, and I hope this masterclass on objection handling helps you close more business. And if you haven't sent in a request before, then please visit our Contact Us page and let us know what topics you would like more detail on. But for now, I, Brian Conway, will say goodbye, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Goodbye.